you. So yeah, so just explain roughly what's going on, but my view won't be omniscient and omnipresent. It will be my view from as much as I can gather what's going on. So before lockdown, things were calming down. I mean, I've been doing a website now since 2010. I've been in library since 94. Cuts started hitting a fan in 2010, really, roughly about the same time as I was starting the website. And it got pretty darn hairy there for a few years, with austerity kicking in at the same time as ebooks. Things were not fun, but then, and this is broad picture stuff, I'm aware that in individual authorities, things might be very different to this, but broad picture, things were calming down. Before lockdown, in the few years before, I was reporting fewer and fewer cuts to library services. The feel amongst librarians was things had turned a corner. Things were a lot calmer. In services, they felt that they could plan ahead and do long-term stuff again and actually be proactive rather than just responding to the next round of cuts. Because what was happening was every 2 or 3 years, the council would say to a library service, you've got to cut 10%, 20%, whatever you have a budget, which meant things went in a downward spiral, actually, because it takes more than a couple of years to react to that and to get into a happy situation. So things were calming down by 2019, say. Again, may not have felt like that in particular services, but generally nationally that was a feeling. And then COVID hit in March 2020, and my, what a fun time that was. I remember just watching it from the librarian perspective and seeing how one of the strengths of library services, which is there's so many of us, was a bit of a weakness, actually, because none of us knew how to respond. To be fair, none of the country knew how to respond to it. And you could see one library service after another closing its doors in a week or two, the amazing week or two before Boris Johnson actually mentioned libraries in his TV talk, saying that they ought to be shut down as memory serves in 2 days in the future. So that was an exciting time. None of us knew how to respond to that, really. None of us had been through it. None of our parents had been through it. It was back to just after First World War before something similar had happened. So we were all inventing things new again. And I think generally public libraries responded better than people had a right to expect. Within the week, I was planning live theatre events on Zoom. We had rhyme times going on online. It was shocking having to lock the doors, but we knew, people were safe, and that was what was important. And then we got used to working from home, and we moved on with more and more services online. Ebook usage went straight up. E-audio usage, I'll talk more about that in a moment, went up as well. And library staff were often redeployed to other services, and those other services actually opened their eyes about the use of librarians, because they went, oh, actually, we've got this whole bunch of staff who I thought just went shush for a living 24/7, and they're actually highly skilled at finding information, organizing information and talking to people. And look, they know how to use computers as well. Who knew? Well, we did, but no one was talking to us. So last year, that was found out by everyone, and our position in councils was strengthened. Actually, you'd have thought it would be weakened, but it was actually strengthened because the library profile somehow got stronger. partly because we were about the only good news service that councils had for a while there, because our ebook usage figures were shooting up and we were doing fun things online while everyone else was basically couldn't do anything. So that was fine. But then, well, it wasn't fine, it was a horrible time, let's be serious, but big picture, it was okay, we were doing better than expected. Then the opening up started, and I remember attending a Libraries Connected conference called Libraries After COVID, which looking back seems an incredibly optimistic title for a workshop, because actually what happened was we were reopening libraries during COVID. We're very much during COVID now, and we very much were last year as well. So there was a tremendous hassle getting libraries, not COVID safe, nothing is COVID safe, but COVID safer. So putting books in quarantine and all that nonsense that we were doing, which we had to do, but it was challenging. So that comes us back to now, where things are almost back to normal for our events and libraries. You do not have to quarantine your books anymore, and so on. So we're back to normal, but yet somehow everything is different. And I'll go through what's different. The big thing is usage is dramatically different now to what it was 2 years ago. And this is highly variable depending on which library service you are. And I've looked at for library services that will tell me what their usage is, and I cannot make head nor tail of why some library services are reporting usage the same as 2 years ago, and other library services are reporting library usage at 1/2 or 2/3 what it was 2 years ago. I don't see why there is such a difference between the experience of different library services, but that's what's being reported to me. My library service is one of those which is about 2/3 usage of what it was 2 years ago, which worries the heck out of us. And it worries us partly because we've never been here before, so we don't know how much of that reduction in usage is permanent. No one does, and how much of that will just recover. I would say the latest figures are suggesting a slow recovery, but we don't know where the new equilibrium is going to be. We don't know where that usage figure is going to stabilize at. Okay, so it might be that it'll get back to 100% of 2019 figures, or it might not. And why some services are reporting dramatically different to others, I don't know. So that's one of the things. Another thing is for usage is what usage we have is different now to what it was 2 years ago. Our ebook and our e-audio is talking books, that shot up. Now that's brilliant in one way, but in another way it causes us some problems, because an ebook title, and especially an e-audio title, costs a fortune compared to a printed title. And even though if we buy an ebook, there's nothing stopping that ebook being lent out 1 million times concurrently, nothing technical stopping us. The publishers do, and they say no, if you buy one title, you only have that one, so you spend 35, 45 pounds, 50 pounds for a talking book title online, and if you want 2 people to be able to borrow that title, you have to buy another one. So that's really expensive, especially so because we are, of course, still having to buy printed books at roughly the same level as there was before. So where's the money coming from? We don't know. We're happy with people coming back into libraries for events now, and I would say that what quarantine and the recovery has shown is the importance of regular groups and activities to libraries. For a few months there, when we had branches that didn't have regular groups and activities going on, oh my goodness, did those libraries feel quiet. So now those groups and activities are coming back in, and there is a buzz coming back to libraries, which is lovely to us. Something else which is an uncertainty is for word budget. Budget is always interesting. Councils have gone through for what's that word? Ringer, is that the term? Have gone through quite a tough time over the last 2 years. They've been asked to spend a lot more money on quite radical things. A lot of them have had to redesign their services and then come back out the other end. But for government is unlikely to give councils a whole ton of money. For spending review announced on the 27th of October was big on smiles, but not so much on dosh. So although we have a nice feel-good sort of vibe coming from government, when you actually look at for money coming out, well, that is very different. And so, for example, for Wirral are saying to central government at the moment, hello, if we don't get £20 million, we're going to have to close a whole ton of stuff because we actually got a financial black hole here. And we're seeing that in other services as well. So just over last week's, I've noticed that Bolton have cut their hours by 70 hours a week. There's a consultation going on in Dorset. Dorset's quite amusing because they've noticed that there's been a reduction in usage in libraries in the last year, which has shocked and surprised them, even though for half of that year, library front doors were locked. So that was like, no, Dorset, there is a genuine reason why our usage has gone down by 95% in some months, and that's because you told us to close the doors. So there's things like that going on. Dorset, Gateshead is closing 5 out of 8. Now, 5 out of 8 is actually the figure of when I started, which is roughly a ratio of when I started doing this in 2010. Library service after library service was putting like 5/8 of their libraries under threat. It's fair to say that although there were a lot of closures in the early 2010s, it turned out in the end, it wasn't as bad as that. It was still bad, but it wasn't 5/8. And it tended to be, and when I say 5 out of 8, that sounds terrible, and it is for people at Gateshead, but it tends to be for smaller libraries that go. So for the actual usage for visitor numbers won't be cut by 5/8, but it's still terrible for those people in the smaller libraries. And there's a consultation in Slough going on. So that's just over the last 2 weeks. So what I don't know is, well, is that a start of an avalanche of cuts over the next few months, where councils have got linking together a reduction in what they can spend with a reduction in library usage and coming out with let's close for libraries as the answer to that equation? I don't know yet, but in some councils already that appears to be the 2 + 2 = close the library equation going on. I promised to mention a bit more about the single digital presence, largely I think because Laura doesn't know what it is. Well, to be fair, none of us truly know what it is. The chief of libraries for Arts Council England gave it a good go and explained it in the website, which I've just looked at before coming on. It won't be a universal libraries catalogue. It won't be that. It won't be a method of borrowing an ebook from your local library off one website. It's not going to be that. What it will be is one place where you can get a link to your local library catalogue, which, you know, I remember that happening 10 years ago. There was a website that could do that 10 years ago. For big new selling point about a single digital presence is it's a place where library services can upload things to, be it a recording of an author visit, a local resource, or a wine time or something. So that appears to be where it's going at the moment. £3.4 million has been put into it, which is a reasonable amount of money, and we're looking for something actually happening first half of next year. but I don't know exactly what it will look like. I don't know how good or how bad it will be. I do know that I desperately wanted a single digital presence, a single libraries website last year, where it would have been really handy to have had something like that when everyone was on lockdown, but that's not happened. It has taken us a decade or two to get to where we are now, and so if we actually get a national libraries website, that's a win of sorts. So that's that. So generally, what we got, just a quick summary of my summary of your whole national situation is you can't tell a single straight story because every library service is different. They all have different pressures, but generally libraries way down in the early 2010s. We covered a bit late 2010s. COVID meant everything was closed, but we did digital stuff and lots of stuff in council, so that upped our profile in those services and nationally as well. And then when libraries opened again, usage went way down because people were a bit unsure about us. And perhaps, and we don't know how many people found other ways of accessing information through Amazon. I know that on others, I know that has happened in at least a few cases because people have returned their books to us and said, oh, I won't be taking out books anymore because I've got Netflix now. So we know there has been a slight change in usage. We just don't know percentages. We know that there's budgetary pressure happening. In some services, that'll be really severe. In others, it might not even be noticed. I don't know. That's where we are at the moment. Answers on a postcard. Thank you. Any questions?
I've had a direct message from Liz Miles. We were going to open this up to questions after Laura and I had said our pieces.
Oh, okay.
Liz, is yours something that can't wait, as it were, or can you wait for 5 or 10 minutes? If you can't.
Yeah, I can wait. I can wait.
Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Ian. Sorry, I'm doing the technical stuff and the chairing and also answering emails from people who haven't been able to get in. Unfortunately, only one of those. Well, one of those has managed it. The other one is unfortunately Jeff Tron, who's one of our trustees.
Oh no! Yeah.
He hasn't yet responded. Anyway.
Okay.
If
I start waffling now, then you can ignore me and get on with doing all these things. Okay. Well, thank you again to Francis Turton for alerting us to this problem. Otherwise, we'd be in even worse trouble than we are. Anyway, okay, so apologies for the mess up. Apologies in advance. I've got this stupid cold, so if I have a coughing fit, yeah, I've got stuff here to swallow, so I hope it won't go on, but so far so good. Ian did a beautiful background, and yeah, I was going to say where the problems seem to be popping up, and we've got the same list. Hendon is another one. What we've been up to, some of the things we've been doing is that we've sent evidence to Barnet about what they're doing to Hendon Library. It's a dreadful overdevelopment, which is really going to wipe out a very beautiful listed central library building and turn it into a business centre for Middlesex University and put the library into a boring little thing that you can hardly see, mediocre design. And we're also pursuing freedom of information questions with Nottingham, which is what our friend Jeff Dron, who can't get in, is doing. It's a super new central library which has fallen foul of a development that they thought was going to give them pots of money to fit it out, but of course some key company went bust and then the pandemic happened, so they're in trouble. So it's just kind of amusing that the big problems at the moment are major developments which were supposed to benefit libraries and don't, Jeff has also sent evidence to Bolton, which did a little bit of good with one of the libraries, but not all of them. We've continued to kind of nurse the Daily Express. I'll come back to that later because it popped up in rather a good way. We did comments with the Northern Echo when they did a piece, and we also briefed Newsnight, which rather pleased me because that's quite a prominent thing. And again, I will come back to that because it's quite important. Here I go. So we really have got you here on False Pretenses. We want to hear from you. What you think, what's going on where you are, and what we could be doing different. That's the kind of thing we've got involved in. We can expect more of it as more dreadful plans get revealed. Last year, we wondered whether friends groups would profit from Libraries Week, which takes place every October and is supposed to be a big national campaign. Some library authorities take it up, some of them don't because October's a busy time anyway. But we sort of wondered whether it would be of any help to friends groups as something they could use in their publicity or on their posters. And people seem to have basically decided not. So if anybody has anything to say about that, I'd be very interested to hear it. And in the meantime, we continue to compile our dodgy consultation file. So any of you out there who are seeing consultations with leading questions and various rather important options left off and all the usual tricks that we see in councils, we'd be very grateful to be informed of those to add it to our dodgy consultation file. Apart from that, what is going on out there? Some of these you can't tell how important they're going to be, so I'm just going to jump in. We have a new Secretary of State. Now, at the culture medium and whatever it's called, sports lot, normally this would not be particularly interesting. There's been 13 new Secretaries of State in the past 14 years. I couldn't even remember half of their names, and others of them kind of just dropped in on their way to greater things. We've had Jeremy Hunt, we've had Matt Hancock, for heaven's sake, we've had Sajid Javid, all sorts of odd people, and it hasn't really mattered because the Secretary of State at the top of things really never says anything about libraries. It's a little bit different this time, so I'm wondering whether that's going to make a difference. We have Nadine Dorries, who's the MP for Mid Bedfordshire. She's quite a character. I think the main reason any of us might have heard of her up till now is that she took time off of Parliament to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Other things like that. She makes great play of her humble background. She comes from Liverpool. She grew up on a council estate. Sometimes they had to hide from the rent man, that kind of thing. As far as her progress, her background as a minister, she's been a health minister with responsibility for suicide prevention and mental health and that sort of thing. So that's no bad thing. She's also a published author, and I gather does pretty well by it. What she produces, I don't think would be described as major literature, but it sells pretty well. So, you know, let's not be snobby about it. She knows a few things about publishing and so on. Other thing that worries me is she's very hostile to the BBC. I don't like that about her. But the other good thing, if you want to look at it that way, is she's a Johnson loyalist from way back. So that might do libraries some good because, unlike most Secretaries of State, she said a couple of things about libraries. Partly as part of the series that we kind of made the Daily Express do, and they call it a campaign. On the 9th of October, she said to the Daily Express, if I have one mission as Culture Secretary, it's to open doors for those who need it most. Libraries are the front line for that effort, and I'll press councils hard to invest in libraries because of the enormous value they provide, she said to the Daily Express. Now, I don't think councils need a lot of pressing, really. They've got other problems. But for a Secretary of State to mention libraries at all is a big deal. And then in an interview prior to a conference, she talks about publishers, the fact that there's not enough diversity on their staff and not enough diversity in what they publish. Then she also said, I'm passionate about libraries. I spent half my childhood in the library. I'd like publishers to look at how to make ebooks more affordable. I know it's an expensive service for libraries to provide. Ian's just explained that that is very much the case. And to quote Michael Caine, not a lot of people know that. So it's a little bit encouraging to have a Secretary of State saying that kind of stuff, especially because we also have a new libraries minister. This is normally the person you hope is going to take libraries in hand and do good things with them. And I cannot pretend I like the look of the new libraries minister. He's called Lord Parkinson of Whitley Bay. He's done very little so far. He's been taken to a library by the staff of the DCMS, which is a start. And he actually met the people at Libraries Connected, which is the Chief Librarians Organisation, about 3 days ago. So that's the flying start he's got off to. His background is just, well, he graduated in 2004. He went straight into a political party HQ research department, and he's battered about between different, but obviously Tory, or he wouldn't be the minister now. So he's battered about between different Tory research departments or Tory think tanks, apart from a break when he lobbied for leaving the EC, i.e. when he was part of the pro-Brexit campaign. And honestly, that is all he's done since he's left university. He's never done anything except be a policy wonk for the Conservative Party, which is not the kind of background experience I would hope to have in a libraries minister. Apart from that, he's tried to be an MP a few times, didn't even get selected, really. So he became an advisor to Theresa May in the Home Office, and then he moved with her to number 10, and she made him a life peer in 2019. And on top of that, he was made a Lord in Waiting, whatever that is, in 2020. So here we have a man who has no background in libraries or culture or of any kind. In fact, he's got no background in anything apart from conservative think tanks with a bit of Brexit. So I have to admit, I'm a bit worried about him. We need to know. So thank goodness we've got possibly something useful in Nadine Dorries as Secretary of State. Finally, just to alert you on all the stuff that's going on, the Libraries Information and Knowledge All-Party Parliamentary Group has been revived. Now that may or may not be influential, but you may as well have it as not have it. So there is a parliamentary group, which is Jill Furness, Labour MP, Valerie Vaz, Labour MP, one Tory called Christian Wakeford, and good old Lord Tope, a Liberal Democrat who's been around for donkey's years. I'm extremely fond of him. So there it is, Libraries and Information and Knowledge. There it is, the group within Parliament. Who knows, it might come in handy. Right, now what else was I going to say? Okay, Mila, another thing. This year, the government produced, for the first time really, an online media literacy strategy. It seems to have noticed there's a lot of dangerous misinformation going around on social media, some of it coming from the government, I have to say, but most of it, the overwhelming majority of it, coming from bad actors is what we call them. It's done enormous damage. It fosters hatred, it kills people who don't want to get vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. So the government has set out a strategy for that. It's good. It actually recognises that libraries might have something to do with this. It set out some basic principles, including the need to teach people critical thinking, resilience to disinformation. So in reaction to that, CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, librarians body, has set up something called MELA, which is the, I keep forgetting, the media, oh heck, I've forgotten again. Media, the something information, media, something media. Information Literacy Alliance. Media and Information Literacy Alliance. CILIP has evinced its support and wants to be part of what they do. We don't really know what they're doing yet, but it's all about empowering people to handle information, keep themselves safe from bad information, be generally connected and socially conscious and good citizens and so on. So at the moment they're really consolidating and so on, but that's something we're part of now. So you are too. And almost finally, I think I could bang on forever about various things, but you also might have heard in the past that there was going to be next year a wonderful festival to celebrate Britain. Lots of people rather unkindly referred to it as the Festival of Brexit, which I think perhaps it's meant to be. Sorry. Whatever misgivings people might have, it is going to happen next year. It's actually called Unboxed for some reason. It covers the whole UK. It has various streams which are about virtual reality and growing nice things and all sorts of different things. But one of them is called Story Trails. And that is going to be where libraries come in. I think we should be fairly chuffed that of all the creative things going on in Britain, libraries managed to score to be one of only 10 things chosen. So I think we should be pleased about that. We don't know enough about that yet. I'm really not clear what it is at all so far. But I've put the website into the chat so you can register to keep up with it. What it says so far is we're transforming the streets, squares, cinemas and libraries of 15 UK towns and cities into gateways to our past. So listen up, these 15 are Blackpool, Bradford, Bristol, Dumfries, Dundee, Lincoln, Lambeth, Lewisham, Newport, Omagh, Sheffield, Slough, Swansea, Swindon, Wolverhampton. So if you live in any of those places, you're going to get whatever it is. I'm a bit bothered that it's going to be confined in that way. I'd rather it was something that covered the whole country. But anyway, they're going to get stories out of people, turn them into stunning augmented and virtual reality experiences and blah, blah, blah. And the way you get into them will be through your local library, which will be a Story Trails portal. So next year we might find out a bit more about what that is, but I'm quite chuffed that libraries have made it into the basic list. The Arts Council has said a few things. It's been working for some time now on a new delivery plan, which is much more than previous ones, about ordinary people taking part, people all over the country getting involved, lots for youth and children and diversity, but above all, everybody a creator, that sort of concept, which we've been happy to encourage. And we've been telling the Arts Council that libraries are really slap in the middle of that. They do all those things. They reach more people than anybody else. They're everywhere, unlike other cultural facilities. They're the first step to anything cultural for a great many people. And of course, literacy and literature are culture things in themselves. So they're gradually getting the message, and they have said a couple of things that we want to hold them to. They've tweeted to say, over the next 10 years, we will increase our investment in public libraries. That is a very strong promise, they said. Adding their reach into areas we find hard to reach is quite simply amazing. So that's something that we want to put into the files and hold them to. And the final thing before I drive you all crazy, I could bore for England about levelling up. I do think this is a big chance for libraries. We all know that the government is a major plank of government policy, except that nobody actually knows what it means yet. But they talk about it a lot. They've actually renamed the local government department, the Department of Levelling Up and something and something. So they're pushing this. And the reason I was pleased that we got our teeth into Newsnight is that when they did their program about library closures, they picked up the tip we gave them about the fact that people are saying these days that levelling up, proper levelling up, should be much more about, well, here's a quote from some research which sums it up very nicely. We publish it in our last magazine. So much of the policy debate about levelling up has focused on headline grabbing projects like HS2, the extension of 4G and 5G, and upgrades to major roads. However, their efficacy depends to an important and often unheralded degree upon the capacities, health, and productivity of the communities and citizens they are designed to connect. There's quite a lot of research coming up on this kind of theme. You don't spend billions on fancy infrastructure, you spend rather less, in fact, on what we might call social infrastructure. And right in the middle of that is public libraries. So if they're serious about levelling up, they should be serious about funding libraries. They're supposed to be producing a white paper before the end of the year. Mind you, it's November, so they're supposed to be doing a white paper by the end of the year. So I really think libraries should be able to capitalise on that. I think that's it. I just wanted to mention, if you're looking just as a lightweight thing, if you're interested in this business of levelling up and libraries as social capital, Libraries Connected, the Chief Librarians organisation, has very generously invited us to partake in their YouTubes and training and stuff like that. And the last link that I put up at the top in blue is to a podcast about palaces for the people, the future of public libraries, which actually features the key thinker in this libraries are about levelling up thing, a guy called Eric Kleinenberg, who's American, but that's all right. He is not a librarian. He is not a person who had fond memories of going to the library as a child. He's a sociologist. He wasn't looking to find libraries, but he did research into how communities survive dreadful things like flooding. And he tripped over libraries without looking for them at all, and has made a very strong point that things like libraries make a huge difference to people's social well-being and indeed to their physical survival. So if you wanted to know more about this kind of thinking, go to the podcast that I've listed. And one final thing, if you're looking for something that's fun to do, next June, give you plenty of time, is Crime Reading Month. If you go to that website, they will find you an author to come and do an event for you. So let's have a bit of fun with crime in June. I will shut up now.
Thank you, Laura. I was just about to say that people who joined after Laura posted her links will not have been able to see them, but Ian has saved me the bother of reposting them by doing so himself. So you should all thank you very much, Ian. I was just about
Just the kind of thing that librarians do. They're so helpful. Thank you.
Okay, now we're rather further advanced in time than I had hoped, so I am going to share my screen very quickly talk you through the library campaign website. Can you stick the thumb up or something if you can see it now? Yeah, good. Okay, those of you that are on screens as opposed to phones, those of you that are on a phone, I apologise. So this is the library campaign website. Essentially, it's in, I suppose you could say, 7 bits. The first bit of which is this bit at the top. Bit about who we are and our committee and that kind of trustees and so on. Invitation to join. Unfortunately, you do have to either print it off or find a way of inserting the text in a PDF. If we can get that changed, we will. Invitation to donate, which is a link to a Just Giving page. How to contact us, search across the site, and we've put in a site map, which I know some people suggested we should have done at the beginning, but that was one of the things we changed earlier this year. Central info is, I hope, does what it says on the tin. Facts about libraries, where the money comes from, how to find your library, who's who, explore more. I am skating through this because obviously most of you can look it up for yourself. The one thing I would, there we go, want to just highlight is this bit here, find your library. This links through to a site maintained by Dave Rowe, who is on this call and therefore may want to say something later. And it basically enables you to find, says on the tin, so you put your postcode in and you can find out where the nearest libraries are. I'll go down this way, friends and groups. So how to start a group and what to do with it and things to think about. Some of the technology that you might want to use to help you, not that we use all of it. I'll come back to that later. That's all fairly straightforward, I think. There is a link somewhere, or there should be, to, yeah, we can send you a sample set of rules if you want to have that. This, I hope, will be useful if you aren't, well, if you're in a group and want to know who else is around, or you're in a group and want to know if we know about you. Because if you click on the geographical bit, you get all the groups we know about. Now, we only know about, I'm sure there are some that are missing, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of these links are now defunct, not valid anymore. So if you're listed and your link is defunct, tell us, and if you're not listed, we will list you if you give us the information. Publicity Tools is a collection of stuff that you may be able to use if you're running a campaign, or indeed if you just want to publicize your friends group. There's another, this is also from Dave Rowe and Libraries Hacked, collection of videos, for instance, and podcasts and blogs about, which are put out by library services and collated together by Dave. Now, the videos certainly, and possibly the podcasts and blogs, only go back a couple of weeks. So you, on the one hand, you can revisit them from time to time and see what's new. On the other hand, if you saw it there once, you may not be able to see it there again. Although if you made a note of it, you can look it up on YouTube or the library website. The stories they tell, this is done by a lady whose name has already slipped my mind, a student in Scotland.
Helen Anderson.
Thank you very much, Helen Anderson. As it says, the crowdsourced library of visuals speaking to the power of public libraries. She would like to do more, I'm sure, and if you want to get in touch with her, you can do through that link. Where are we now? I'll go up from the bottom. Our magazine, if you join the library campaign, and we are a membership organisation, we depend on the money that largely on the money that we get from people who join us, their annual subscription, and it's £15 or £10 for concessions for individuals, £20 for groups. So it's not an arm and a leg. And you can see that you can see copies of the magazine going back for 17 years. And if you click on it, then you can read it online. But if you join, you'll get copies sent to you in the post. It comes out about a couple of times a year. What friends can do, how you to support your library. Arguably, this is the campaigning bit, the most campaigning bit, because it does tell you how to do freedom of information campaigns, how to do a press release, how to get published, and tips on how to do all those things. It helps that Laura has a past as a journalist, because she knows how to do those things, or should do. And then finally, this is the what's happening. This is where we put the current news. We don't put something up every day necessarily, but the last 5 stories are there. So there was that link to this meeting, for instance, a lovely picture of Ian from years ago. Link to Ian's website, and then links to our Facebook, Twitter, and now Instagram. On this call is Pete Inkpen, who has been doing a few hours work for us for a week, for 3 or 4 months, and he has created an Instagram account and is also will be working with us on Facebook and Twitter. So if you're on Instagram, you might want to look for the library campaign and follow us, and tell people about it. Facebook, we are on. We have had some technical issues with Facebook, which I'm not going to bore you with, but we're going to try and get over those and make more use of it. And then Twitter, we're also on. So that was a really whistle-stop tour. I'm going to stop sharing and bring us back to the meeting. As I said at the beginning, if you have comments or questions or comments about the website, you can chuck them into the discussion that's about to start, or you can email us separately. You can email us separately. So I hope that wasn't too quick. It took slightly longer than I'd intended because I was timing myself, but it's now 8:30, just gone. So in theory, we've only got half an hour for the general discussion, but there's no reason why we can't extend it if we need to or want to. So I'm now going to suggest that we throw it open. Liz Miles had indicated she wanted to say something after Ian spoke, so I suggest that, as we know that there's a question from Liz, she asks it now. And then the rest of you, please stick your hand up or make us aware of your wish to say something in some shape or form. Liz.
I was really interested in what you were saying about the cost of ebooks and audio books over possibly printed books. And I really would find it so useful to understand exactly why, for example, Essex County Council are pushing digital over printed books. Obviously, it's possibly because they want to close down the staff and the buildings, but how much more expensive are ebooks and audiobooks over printed books? I mean, what is that an issue, really, the fact that they're expensive?
It's really variable. There isn't a public lending right for ebooks and e-audiobooks, which means the publishers don't actually have to give us anything, don't have to sell us anything if they don't want to. And it depends on the goodwills and benevolence of individual publishers as to what the prices are. And I can see, because I buy for children's books for my library service, so I can see the e-book and e-audio costs, and they're wildly variable. Some publishers will charge basically the same cost as a paperback for the ebook, which is really appreciated. And then that can be unlimited life to it. So I can pick up a £6.99 children's ebook, which is never going to get dirty and which I can keep forever in my library service. It actually is a very good deal. Then you get on the other end a publisher like Hachette, who have until recently just simply refused to let libraries have any of their ebooks. And Hachette owns about 20 different imprints. They're one of the biggest publishing houses out there, which is why if you try and borrow an ebook from your local library and the computer says no, it's quite possibly because it's owned by Hachette, and Hachette says none because they're a French-owned company. And then it's wildly variable between those two extremes of cheapest chips to impossible to get. But often for a decent best-selling book, you're looking at £30 for an ebook, and sometimes that is limited to 24 issues or 2 years life. So after 2 years, or it's borrowed 24 times, it simply disappears from your catalogue, and you have to buy another copy at whatever figure the publisher chooses to charge for it. And that's for ebooks. E-audiobooks is generally more expensive. So generally you're looking at a median price for an ebook for about £20 to £30, and for e-audio you're looking at £30 to £50 for an e-audio title. Because e-audio has become easier to get hold of, because our library websites are actually getting easier. Things like BorrowBox are pretty similar to Amazon now, and so once you've typed in your library card and your PIN, they're actually pretty easy to use. Because of that ease of use, we're actually getting an increase in usage for e-audio and ebooks, which is wonderful. But it actually causes us a problem if we're having an increase in demand and same as shrinking budgets. And it's not one which retail outlets have, because of course, if you have an increase in sales, you also have an increase in income if you're a bookshop. But that is not the case in libraries. If we have an increase in usage, we have no increase in budget, and indeed we often have a reduction, because that's how libraries are. So there is that challenge. Why a council would push ebooks? I think you can sometimes see a sort of Illuminati sort of conspiracy thing going on, but I don't think councils are that clever. In my experience of councils, they don't think that far ahead. I think they just think to themselves, digital is cool. For cool kids have digital, therefore we need to push digital. And I think that is sometimes how councils think. And they might think, there might be one or two conspirators amongst them who goes, ha, this means we can get rid of 10 libraries. Ha! It's for new volunteers. Yes, we've got another reason to get rid of a library. That is technically possible. It's not one that I've seen definitely. I think it tends to be, the thought process is the council has got a big hole in its budget, and they search desperately for somewhere to fill that hole. And if they can't get it from anywhere else, they'll try it on with their local library. But for digital side, it's a real challenge. The Americans have got more success than us in dealing with their publishers, partly because the American Library Association has a lot more clout than the British equivalent. They had, I think, Barack Obama speaking to their last conference, and it's, we tried to get him, but it's a bit of a challenge over here. So it is a serious push for that over here. It started strongly with university libraries and getting stronger over time, because libraries feel that they're being manipulated and exploited. But in the end, unless there's public lending right, we depend on the kindness of publishers, and like the kindness of strangers, that's a bit variable.
Thank you. Before Katie comes in,
could I just respond to that?
well, no, I just want to say,
Okay.
Dave has clarified that there is a PLR for ebooks now. I thought there was. I think it has been introduced.
Yeah, I get lending rights for ebooks.
Yeah. So that I think
is fair. Well, there may be, but there isn't. What I mean by public lending right is that they can charge us what they want for the title. They might be able to not be able to say no, you can't have it, but they can say that'll be £55, please. So it's it's how you define it.
Yeah, and PLR has nothing. Public lending right to authors has nothing to do with whether publishers can or will sell books to libraries. The six biggest publishing conglomerates when I was working, which is nearly 6 years ago now, would not allow, well, only 5 of them would not allow their books to be lent to public libraries, or to be lent by public libraries at all. The other one was the 26 loans, and then you have to buy it again. Liz, can you let you back in? But Katie's got her hand up, so I want to get her in as well. Liz, go on.
Okay, just very quickly, I know for a fact from 30 years in working in literacy that reading printed books is vital for all levels of learning. And so I think people like Susan Barker at Essex County Council saying people don't read any books anymore is a deliberately ploy to get people onto digital, because it's cheap, because you can get rid of the buildings, you can completely get rid of all the structures and all that stuff that they don't really want.
I think sometimes...
So we really need to push that. We need to push that, otherwise our campaign is dead. If we're saying digital is great, then our campaign is dead, to my mind.
Yes, so I mean, I should say councillors are human too, and they come in all shapes and sizes. I'm a councillor for my local town, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and some of them are a bit more out of touch than others, I would say. Okay.
I think we need to move on. This is turning into a bit of an Essex thing, because I've got Katie and Martin, who are both from Essex. But who knows what they might want to talk about Darlington or Timbuktu. Katie.
Well, mine isn't specific to Essex at all. There's something that Ian said when in his part about how different libraries are seeing different types of return of visitors, and that there isn't any, we don't have an idea why this is. So I just wondered if anyone is actually looking into this, and if not, shouldn't we be looking into it and trying to understand this phenomenon? Because I'm assuming that councils aren't going to.
Libraries Connected do ask for regular figures from councils. The issue is that those councils with bad figures are not necessarily for ones sharing with Libraries Connected, and the ones with good figures are definitely for ones connecting them with Libraries Connected. So there is what I can see is my own service, and it is widely variable even within my own service what's going on, and what other people tell me, and other people tell me either it's half or 2/3 usage of what it was, or it's absolutely the same as before and nothing to see here, gov. Look over there, look, shiny. So it's, I don't know. And I don't think anyone really knows. And my conversations with Libraries Connected suggest they're not quite sure either.
But it sounds like just looking at the figures that are sent in isn't enough, that it needs some qualitative research, talking to users and staff and so on, which I know obviously is a mammoth task, but at least if it could be done in some areas so one can see if there are any patterns, or I can speculate for my own area, but obviously it might be very different in each area, and it seems to be something that one needs to understand, really, because there might be lessons to learn about what is working in some areas and not in others, and so on.
Libraries Connected have got a lot better at this, and they mutated from a society of chief librarians who perhaps weren't so useful. But Libraries Connected have actually got into a far more genuinely useful organisation, and they are genuinely looking at reasons why, and they do share best practice. But for something like this, I think it would need a quite a detailed research project, and who's going to do it, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I think I want to get as many people in as possible. Martin's had his hand up for a few minutes. Martin.
I'll try and keep it very brief, but I'd like to change the focus of the conversation a little bit, because I feel that library groups, the library campaign in general, and library groups across the country need to be less reactive and more assertive in the way that they campaign, and that we should be making not just suggestions. I hesitate to use the word demand because it's not quite the right word, but I do think that we should be making positive proposals about what services libraries should be providing. For example, in Essex, and here I'm getting on a bit of a hobby horse, in Essex, there's no adult literacy plan. Yet adult literacy it is a really major problem across the country, costs the country millions of pounds. It hits all the right buttons for national and local government, its priorities, and it's something which could be dealt with by local libraries at a fraction of cost of many of the publicity initiatives that libraries go in for. And I also think that, for example, where a few years ago there were library standards which were set by the previous government, I don't see any reason why the users of the library service should wait for government to set the standards, but that we should actually set standards and say which local authorities are prepared to meet them. And I feel that there's a range of issues where we can change the whole tenor of the campaign and get more people on board helping us, because we won't just be saying, we don't want this library closed or that library closed or that service dropped. We say, your library can be more efficient if you do this. You can serve your public better. You can attract more readers if you have more services. And so I would like to see the library campaign and local groups actually discuss assertive campaigning rather than defensive campaigning all the time.
Okay. Anybody else, particularly those that haven't spoken? Alison is using the chat very commendably, since she can't get heard in the nicest possible way. Yeah, something Martin said sparked off an idea. It sparked something off in my mind, but it's gone again. So, Ian, have you anything you wanted to come back to on Martin's point, or on indeed on anything else that since you last spoke?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, to be proactive rather than reactive, I think it is brilliant to do. And I know from my own experience of national and local media, if they're not so interested in good news stories, they want for bad news stories. I always get contacted a lot when libraries look to be due for closures, and sometimes I get the idea that reporters are genuinely disappointed when I reply that actually there's no major cuts going on in the UK in a given month. You just hear the depression in their voices as they realise they don't have a bad news story. In terms of library standards, yes, English libraries literally have no standards. Whether there will be enough resources for like a grassroots push to get that, I think that will be a challenge and a long, hard slog. I mean, I think it's an admirable thing to do. I would say with councils, we're as reactive as anyone else, I would say, working in councils. So if you can push us, and if you find the right people to push, then we can be the reactive ones, and we will be responding to your call for adult literacy and so on, rather than doing what we were planning to do. And that is possible. It does take quite a lot of pressure, I would say, sometimes to change council's course.
Just before Laura comes in, thank you. I would say that we have been talking fairly regularly to Libraries Connected about, just to find out what they're up to and tell them what we're up to and see if there's any commonality. And they are developing what they're calling an accreditation scheme for public libraries, which is going to be, I think, similar to the museum's accreditation. So they reach a certain standard. Now the problem is that, well, two issues. One is they haven't got any users involved in the development of these, except insofar as they invited us to comment on the first draft or whatever it was called. The second thing is that perhaps because of that, the stuff that they're putting in does seem to be what I can only describe as a little woolly. And if it were to come out, I don't think most of us, if not any of us, around this virtual room would see them as standards in the sense that we would want them. I've got Laura and then Pete.
Okay, well, I was about to say what you said. It was on my list. I forgot to say it. Yeah, they didn't think of involving us in their accreditation thing, so we made sure we got involved. And I'm really cross that Alison cannot speak, because she was one of the people who gave us some very useful feedback. What they are producing at the moment, as far as we can tell, is awfully woolly and awfully qualitative. I mean, yeah, there's always this battle, isn't there, in every field between qualitative and quantitative. If you just count the number of people who go into a building or whatever, that doesn't really give you a lot of information about everything. You need to know about how the library service improved their lives and stuff like that. You really need the two, and they're being a bit too qualitative. So I greatly fear that what they're going to produce at this rate is going to be a report from a library service saying, we've looked at our service and we've decided it's good. And another bunch of librarians have also looked at it and they agree with us. So that will be the way it will be validated. I don't think it will do at all. And the other thing, I'm genuinely shocked that Essex doesn't have anything for adult literacy. For heaven's sake, there is plenty of material, for instance, with the reading campaign, the reading agency. I mean, there's stuff there. There are special easy read books to give people. There are competitions to encourage people to read. There's all sorts of stuff there that Essex could just take off the shelf. So I really think, if I were you, I would make a big deal of that, and maybe we should inquire of other members. I mean, I just took it for granted that every library service would be doing adult literacy. So thank you, Martin. I'm absolutely agape at that. We must think on. Well,
those of us in Essex can have that to follow up that discussion somewhere else. Pete, did you want to come in?
Sorry, yeah, I feel like you kind of covered it really, but it was just this question about standards and if there is some kind of bare minimum national standards, but I guess that's kind of been covered now because there isn't, apparently. So, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, there isn't. There are in Scotland and Wales. The English ones were ditched back in the noughties, or 2010 or whenever it was 11. They could be a basis for coming up with something new, although, you know, there were arguments that they weren't quite right. But again, that's a discussion that we perhaps ought to be having outside, but it is something arising from this meeting that we might well want to follow up. Martin.
Yep.
You're on mute. You're still on mute. That's better.
Just very briefly, I think this is something where it ought to be possible to work with Libraries Connected. After all, they are the professional body. There's nothing to stop them setting standards for libraries across the country. And then people can quite rightfully say, look, the professional body has set these standards of you know, so many books per thousand, so many libraries per head of population, so many opening hours and so on. How does your library compare with them? I think it would be, if you know, they could be based on the previous standards that were used to be in use, or the Scottish ones, or other existing standards, and gradually modified over a year or two. But I think that the idea of having an external body setting up some form of standards that the local authority libraries can be told can be used to measure their service against effectively has a great deal of bargaining power to go with it.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if you meant Libraries Connected when you said Libraries Connected, but Ian's made a point in the chat already that they certainly can't force library services to do anything, and their membership would probably push back if they tried it. If you meant CILIP, well, that's another story, although I think currently...
Yeah, sorry, I did mean CILIP, sorry, yes.
I think even CILIP, well, CILIP might try it, but I don't think they have the resource, to be blunt. But I mean, you know, as I say, I think it's something that we can take away from this, is something to look at and see whether and how we can pursue it. I'm not seeing any other hands, which might be a rash thing to say. Oh, Laura, you're on mute, that's it.
I just wanted to add really that this standards thing would be a massive piece of work. Libraries Connected, who are doing the work now, got a pretty big grant from Arts Council, I think it was, to do it, and I got all hopeful. I was hoping for something very much like the old standards, with a bit of extra quality and so on, quality standards, if you see what I mean, not just bean counting. And I personally am very disappointed indeed with what they've come up with, and maybe we should start making a fuss about it. I'd be quite interested to know what Ian thinks, actually, as a practicing librarian with consenting adults. I think they're awful.
I've not had a good look at what CILIP is suggesting. I do know there's, well, two things really. Government has absolutely no interest in there being enforceable standards, because if they did, they'd have to enforce them. And for government believes strongly in localism, which is a deal with local councils for government gives them low amounts of funding, but in return, local councils can decide precisely how they spend it. This suits for government brilliantly well, because they can always blame a local council for cuts. And if there were actually public library standards, like so many square feet of building per 10,000 population, so many titles per 10,000 population, then they'd have to intervene at some stage. Now, when it comes to chief librarians, some of those have argued to me that public library standards are dangerous because their political masters can say, hang on, your library service is in the top 10th percentile for book budget. I sent a saving there. Let's cut our budget, my good man. Thanks very much for bringing it to my attention that your book budget is strong. Now, in effect, I've not seen that happening. I'd have to say, I think that is a bit of a worry. And those places that do have standards, like for west of the UK, for instance, they make a big thing of those services which are doing well with the standards, and I see that having very positive press publicity. And then also, if Welsh Service, for instance, scores lowly for Welsh Public Library standards, then they get a bad news story in the press, which is a brilliant motivator for that council not to cut budget more. So in effect, I would say standards are a good thing, but when it comes down to it, if you don't have a government that's willing to enforce it, or indeed enforce anything, then it is kind of a paper exercise. In the end, if we had a government that was willing to enforce things, then a very different story.
Okay, we are just about to hit 9 o'clock, which is when we planned to stop, although we did start a little late. So I'm happy to carry on if people have got other stuff to say. Galaxy S10e has just joined the call. Not sure who that is. If you are able to rename yourself,
Galaxy, yeah.
Please do. Unfortunately, I think you've missed the bulk of it, but we are recording and we will be broadcasting it in a day or two on our YouTube channel. And I will try and send people an email when I've put it up, so that you can it's there. Assuming I think I've got everybody's email that's on the call at the moment. But I'm not going to prolong this just for the sake of it, because most of us have spent enough time on Zoom over the last 20 months that another 10 minutes may seem, even now, like 10 minutes too much. I think I am going to suggest that we call it a day. Just by way of conclusion, and Laura may want to say something in a second. I think we have got stuff that we can think about in going forward. That's a phrase I hate using. In the future. Such as standards, such as adult literacy, possibly, all that may be an Essex thing, and some other stuff which I haven't written down, but I'll watch the recording back. I hope that you found what Ian and Laura said in particular useful and educational, and I hope it has been of interest. Laura has just put our email in the chat, and yes, we had one or two other messages down there. I don't know whether and when we will do another one of these. It was actually several months since the last one, but we'll think about that. We may well have an in-person meeting, who knows, in the new year. What I would reiterate is that from what I said, the two things from what I said. One is, please look at the website if you haven't done so already. Please send us any comments that occur to you. I won't take offence, or we won't take offence. We may not act on them, but we will look at them. And if we're able to reply saying why we haven't acted on them, we can do that too. The other thing which I said was that the Library Campaign is a membership organisation. And there are a number of people on this call who are members, but the more we have, the better. And if you can spread it to other people and get them to join as well, that would be better still. When we have an in-person meeting, we really want to get more people actively involved. As I said, Pete's been doing stuff on social media for us, but it would be nice to have a lay activist, if I can call them that, or who is prepared to get involved in that sort of thing, for instance. And the more people we have who are active and want to be active, the more we may be able to do. Laura, do you want to say anything before we shut down? And if you do, take yourself off mute.
Yes, not really. Thank you everybody for coming. If you have ideas after the fact, which is often the way we do it, do please send it to us. And yeah, we really want to hear from friends groups more. We don't know whether we're really doing what you want, or indeed whether we could screw any kind of support down to view or sharing of information and insights that might benefit other friends. So yeah, thank you for coming tonight. I'm just typing in an answer to Graham, but that's it. We would like this to be a beginning of people thinking rather than end of people thinking. So I hope you'll get in touch.
And what I should have said was thanks very much to Ian in particular as our star guest speaker, even though he didn't do his pantomime acts for us, but maybe next time. I'm going to leave this call open for a few minutes so that if anybody wants to copy the chat, and there are some links in there that you might want to do to take note of. If you've got the chat, there's on my screen there's the 3 little dots on the bottom right of the chat. You click on that. If you click, you get save chat, and that will enable you to, funnily enough, save the chat. So, but that apart, I think we're done for the night. So thank you and have a good evening.